just because it was brought out about Dr. Atkins' claim to reverse heart disease. And he said he's working on the data, but he's been making this claim for a long time.
No, I haven't.
And that's what excuse me.
But I haven't been making that claim.
You just did, and you don't have the evidence to back it up. Now, this diet's been out there for 30 years, or close to 30 years.
And I haven't been able to fund a study.
Excuse me. 10 million books in print, and you can't fund the study?
Now I can. And I will be the first doctor to dig into his own pocket to do a study. And it will be me, but it was the first time I had a
10 million books. You market the vitamins. You sell the vitamins to correct the nutritional deficiencies.
That's true. That's why I'm doing a study now.
I keep saying...
That's why I couldn't do it before.
You market this. I say this is not for the public good. This is marketed. This is a money-making proposition.
Well, I do care that a lot of people are believing what Dr. Atkins is saying and making choices that I think are harmful to them. And to go back to your earlier question, I think that the way that people can help to reconcile different points of view is to say, what is the science? Are these published in peer-reviewed journals? The whole point of science is to help people resolve conflicting claims by saying, what is the evidence? What is the experimental design? Now, I'm not aware of any studies that Dr. Atkins or Dr. Sears have published in any peer-reviewed journal about anything ever. And, you know, that's important.
And they would say, you know, I was on the Atkins diet, I was on a high-protein diet, I was cranky, I was miserable, I lost a lot of weight, I looked great, but nobody wanted to talk to me.
So what's the point?
Well, I think that's minor. The number of people who actually present that as a complaint to me is so rare. It really doesn't happen. It's quite possible that these people are not taking vitamins or something because the people in my office simply don't have that problem. And if they did, it would be so minor compared to the major problems that they're confronted with. They're confronted with a need to have a bypass. They're
okay, we didn't really answer the question.
Diabetes. They're on 6 or 7 high blood pressure medicines and other medications, and we get them off their medications. This is serious stuff. Whether the sweet smell of ketones is considered bad breath or just sweet breath is a matter of opinion.
Smells like money. Dr. McDougall?
Yeah, I want you to know that I'm concerned about the recommendations for high-protein diets because the foods that are emphasized are the very foods the Heart Association is condemned as causing heart disease, the Cancer Society is condemned as causing cancer, and the Surgeon General is condemned for being the leading cause of death and disability in this country. I'm concerned.
I am concerned about the American Heart Association's recommendations of Fruit Loops and Pop-Tarts having their seal of approval. If that's their recommendation, I'm certainly happy that they're not in my camp. I wouldn't want them there.
Yeah, and you know, Dr. Atkins, following up on, let's say, the severe, which you're usually put in that category, would you have a patient that would come to you, because I think about the importance today about treating the individual and everybody's individual lifestyles, food preferences. Have you had people who come to you and you'd say to them, I don't think this is for you?
50% of my patients, I don't think it's for them, because 50% of my patients don't have a weight problem.
Okay, of the people who do have a weight problem.
That rarely happens. If the weight problem is serious, then I'm going to work on restricting carbohydrates. They may have some other problems. I never put any 2 people on the same diet because we do food allergy testing. So we know right from the very beginning which foods certain people have to avoid, and that's not the same in other people. And they may come in with a different problem. I don't want people to think that most people come to me with a weight problem. Only about 10% of the people come to me. It's because I am a cardiologist. Most of the time they come to me because they were told the same thing that David Letterman heard. You got to have a bypass, only these people weren't intimidated enough to get it right away. They came to see me, and 85% of those people didn't need a bypass after we went on our program. This is why I sort of resent the idea that people are saying that my diet is not heart healthy. If it were not heart healthy, we wouldn't be reversing heart disease and getting these people who were having chest pain on a little bit of exertion out there running and jogging a few months later.
This brings me to Dr. Ornish to follow up on that. Dr. Ornish, would you then, this is a question from someone in the audience, tiny handwriting, by the way, with your focus being on disease prevention diet and reversal diet, would you at any time recommend a high-protein diet for severely obese individuals? I mean, high-protein fasting?
Well, first of all, let me say that I would love to see some data from Dr. Atkins showing that he can actually get reversal of heart disease, measuring the underlying disease process.
We're working on it.
Well, good. I'd
But
love to see it.
we're not as good a fundraiser as you are. We have to dig into our own pockets. That's the problem.
I'm sorry. Carolyn, can I address that issue?
I think with the number of books you've sold, you could probably fund your own studies.
These are the different numbers.
I recommend most people, unfortunately, when they think about the diet I recommend, think about the reversal diet. And it is a strict diet, and I'd love to be able to tell people that more moderate changes can reverse heart disease, but they don't. Every study that's been done where they've looked at arteriography has found that a 30% fat diet, the majority of people continue to get worse. But there is a genetic variability in how efficiently your body can handle fat and cholesterol. And it's a bell curve. In fact, the Nobel Prize in 1975 went to Brown and Goldstein to discover the LDL receptors. On one end of the spectrum are the 95-year-old men or women, and you say, what do you eat? And they say, oh, I have 12 eggs for breakfast and a steak for lunch. And you kind of go, well, maybe a diet isn't that important. Look what they're eating. But they're so efficient at getting rid of fat and cholesterol, it almost doesn't matter what they eat. And those people who weren't so efficient at getting rid of it never made it to 95, so you have a selected group. On the other end of the bell curve are people with heart disease or high cholesterol. In general, they have fewer LDL receptors, they're less efficient, and so that's why just making moderate cutbacks in fat and cholesterol doesn't go far enough, because they're still eating more than they can get rid of, and it keeps building up in their arteries. So what I tell people is that if your cholesterol level is below 150 consistently, or your ratio of total to HDL is below 4, then either you're not eating much fat and cholesterol or your body's very good at getting rid of it. Either way, your risk of disease is so low, whatever you're doing is probably fine.
Thank you.
Most people don't fall into that category, and they can begin by making more moderate changes until they get to that point.
Okay. Which reminds me when I went to the mechanic and they said, I think your microtuner's maladjusted. I'm like, I didn't know what it meant. So sometimes the explanations are long, they're complicated, but they're very important, obviously, in educating, especially when most of the American public has no baseline of nutrition knowledge. You wanted to make a comment, Dr. Ayub?
Just because it was brought out about Dr. Atkins' claim to reverse heart disease. And he said he's working on the data, but he's been making this claim for a long time.
No, I haven't.
And that's what excuse me.
But I haven't
Excuse
been
me.
making that claim.
You just did, and you don't have the
Before.
evidence to back it up. Now, this diet's been out there for 30 years, or close to 30
And I
years.
haven't been able to fund a study. I've asked
Excuse
and
me.
asked
Excuse
and
me. 10 million books in print, and you can't fund the study?
Now I can. And I will be the
Excuse
first
me.
doctor to dig into his own pocket to do a study. And it will be me, but it was the first time I had any
10
money
million
left.
books. You market the vitamins. You sell the vitamins
Now.
to correct the nutritional deficiencies.
That's true.
Where-
That's why
and
I'm
you
doing
market
a
them.
study now.
I keep saying-
That's why I couldn't do it before.
You market this. I say this is not for the public good. This is marketed. This is a money-making proposition.
Yeah, and I think what happens with tests and research and studies, which is what we've all been talking about, I even wonder, too, what the level playing field is in presenting information. We have found, we have shown, certainly all of us in the press want to know where those statements come from, what they're based on, and is there, in fact, a level playing field when people go and give their presentations? And Dr. McDougall, you haven't said anything in a while, so we'll bring you in. In terms of presenting, everybody can throw up their, Journal of the American, this, that, and the other thing. And does it matter how many you have piled up there to make your diet the best?
This is why I gave an example that no one can deny, and that is you look around the world. What do you see? If I asked you to design a diet, and I gave you the world and the populations of people, design a diet where people would be thin for a lifetime, what populations would you pick? China, Korea, Japan, African countries. It's obvious. They live on starch-based diets with the addition of fruits and vegetables, and rich foods are kept to a minimum. And when these people move to the United States or change their diet in their own land, they consistently get fat, heart disease, rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, and on and on. This is a no-brainer. Okay, my first question is, why are we debating? I thought this was all settled. The Surgeon General of the United States in 1988 issued a report on diet and health in America, and he said 5 of the 10 leading causes of death are due to our diet, including obesity. And he said very clearly in his conclusions that it's due to the disproportionate consumption of foods high in fats, often at the expense of foods high in complex carbohydrates and fiber. So why are we heading in this other direction? I don't understand. You've heard that carbohydrates are bad for you. And if that were the case, when you looked to Japan, you'd see fat, sickly, lethargic people. And when those Japanese people moved to Washington, D.C., they'd get trimmer and healthier as they decrease their rice intake. Is that what you see? No. I was at a restaurant recently, and to my left at a table sat some first and second generation Japanese people eating rice, looking trim, healthy, and young. On my table to the right sat some third and fourth generation Japanese people. What happened? Did they change their genetics? They now eat less carbohydrate, less rice, and more protein, fat, dairy, and meat. You can see this. You don't have to be, just look around. What you see worldwide is that in countries where people eat high carbohydrate diets, Africa, the Middle East, the Far East, they're trim, they have low rates of heart disease, breast cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer. And when they move to the United States and Western Europe and they abandon their high carbohydrate diet, they get fat and sick. You know, the first case of rheumatoid arthritis was described in Africa in 1957, and the first case of lupus was described in Africa in 1960. Today in the United States, the highest incidence of lupus and rheumatoid arthritis is among the African American people. What happened in 40 years? Now, the high protein diet books, they're all the rage, aren't they? For the last 9, that's what it's been. The most popular books. Well, there are some reasons for it. It's easy to follow a high protein diet. You just throw away the hamburger bun, right? And they have done some good. They've made people aware of the harmful effects of sugar in refined foods, and that's very important. And people have lost weight, sometimes quickly, but rarely permanently. All high-protein diet books blame obesity on too much insulin, as you've heard today. That's the culprit, right? That's the evil hormone. Well, do they really? Let's take a look at the research. Suzanne Holt published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 1997. She looked at insulin response to various foods. Brown pasta produces less insulin than beef. White pasta less insulin than cheese. Porridge less insulin than fish. 72 people were studied. This is from the Pritikin Institute. They put them on a 3-week intensive diet and exercise program. 80% carbohydrate. These were diabetics, insulin-resistant people, normal people, and they cut their insulin levels in half. They also cut their triglycerides nearly in half, too. Now you say, well, that's the exercise. Well, in part it is. But we've known that low carbohydrate, high fat feeding produces insulin resistance. That's what the scientific research says. And it also says that carbohydrate improves insulin sensitivity. Read the research. It's clear and it is consistent. Obesity has been mentioned as caused by too many calories. We're not eating less fat in this country. The research says we're eating about the same. But we're eating a lot more sugar. We're eating more flours. We're going to fast food industries more, snack foods, and we're not exercising as much. And I want to point out in the time that the high protein diets have ruled, the last 8 to 9 years, we've increased obesity from 12 to 18%. Something's missing. Now, the mechanism for short-term weight loss, Dr. Atkins told you that the way his diet works is similar to fasting. Well, nature is designed us so that if we don't have food and we're starving to death, it doesn't hurt so much to die. So we develop ketosis, which suppresses the hunger drive, a natural mechanism. Ketosis also occurs when we get severely ill, and the reason is we're not supposed to be gathering and preparing food, we're supposed to be recuperating. So the natural mechanism that occurs when you get sick is the mechanism utilized in ketogenic diets, and that's why I call them the make-yourself-sick diets. The other way that they work, the other kind of diets, as recommended by Dr. Sears and the Sugar Busters, is a diet that results in semi-starvation. They invoke complicated rules and restrict foods. And of course, you can't stay on either one of these diets for very long because you can't stay sick forever and you can't be hungry forever. The mechanism for long-term weight loss on a high-carbohydrate diet is the stomach is filled with fewer calories because this is a low-calorie dense diet. Fats are very calorie-dense. Excess carbohydrates are not usually converted to fat, contrary to what you've heard today. Carbohydrate provides a high level of satiety, and fat has a weak level of satisfaction of the appetite. Let me talk about this in a little more detail. Each of the stomachs contains 500 calories. The stomachs at the bottom filled with meat, cheese, and butter barely make a dent in filling the stomach. Whereas the stomachs filled with rice, corn, and potatoes fill or overfill the stomach with the same 500 calories. When you switch from a high meat, high fat diet to a high carbohydrate diet, you decrease the calorie concentration by 1/4. In other words, for the same volume of foods, you got 1/4 as many calories. The fat you eat is the fat you wear. The human body does the most efficient thing possible with everything that you give it. So you give it protein, which it utilizes to build things. You give it carbohydrate, which it utilizes to run the machinery. And you give it fat, which is the metabolic dollar that is saved for when food is no longer available, which never seems to happen. Multiple studies and reviews have clearly shown that the body does not convert carbohydrate into fat under ordinary circumstances. It's called de novo lipogenesis. And according to this study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition and multiple studies, dietary carbohydrates do not appear to increase an individual's fat content by de novo lipogenesis. It's too wasteful to do that. But it effortlessly stores fat. In fact, so effortlessly, you know, you can come to somebody, you can stick a needle in their buttocks, thigh, or abdomen, suck the fat out, you can take it to the lab, and you can analyze it, you can tell what they like to eat. If they like cold water marine fish, they'll be full of omega-3 fats. They like margarines and shortenings, they'll be full of trans fats. The fat you eat is the fat you wear. As far as satisfaction of appetite, do you know that the potato, which has been maligned here today, is among the most satisfying of all foods? It is 7 times more satisfying than croissants and twice as satisfying as cheese and beef. Yeah. And fat has a very, very poor effect on satisfying the appetite. This has again been shown in multiple studies. Go to the National Library of Medicine, read it. It's clear and consistent. The satiating effect of fat is weak, and carbohydrate-rich breakfast may assist weight control efforts by maintaining fullness. Yes, and John Blundell tells us that eating fat results in passive overconsumption and a disproportionate weak effect on satiety. In my patients, I run a clinic at St. Helena Hospital where people eat as much as they want. They eat 3 times a day. They eat wonderful meals. And the average weight loss for overweight men is 5.3 pounds in 11 days. And women is about 4 pounds in 11 days. I just finished a 1-year study for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, and we found an 8% reduction in weighted patients at 1 year. That's a 16.5 pound weight loss. The National Weight Control Registry was mentioned, very important study. The important thing for you to know is they studied 450 people, and those who were able to keep 30 pounds off for more than a year consistently ate a low-fat diet, which is a low-energy diet. In fact, 80% of them ate less than 30% fat, and 30% of them ate less than 20% fat. There's where the long-term results are. We also get cholesterol changes that are significant and important. We get a 29-point drop in cholesterol in 11 days at the clinic. If you start with high cholesterol, we get a 65-point drop in cholesterol in 11 days. And our triglycerides also drop. There's an average of a 10-point drop in triglycerides, but if you start with high triglycerides, say over 600, they drop on an average of 311 points. Now, the diet I recommend is a starch-based diet with the addition of fruits and vegetables. It is a traditional diet. It's what most people who have ever walked this planet have consumed. A diet of rice for Asia, a diet of pasta for Southern Europe, a diet of breads for Northern Europe. A starch-based diet with the addition of fruits and vegetables. Now, throughout history, this is what most people consumed, except on special days, on holidays, on festival days, and then they celebrated. They danced in the street, they took the day off work, and maybe they'd roast a pig and have a feast. Now, most people could only do this on occasion, but in every society there were some rich people. And they had so much fun at that party that they took that idea up to the hill and up to their castle, and they feasted 3 times a day, 7 days a week. And do you remember what these aristocrats, kings, and queens looked like? They look like Americans. That's what they look like. That's how I was raised. I started out every morning with Easter. I went on to Thanksgiving and Christmas for lunch and dinner. And every night after dinner, I had a birthday party. And that is the problem. We need to put rich food back into special occasions. If you're tired of looking like a king and queen, then what you need to do is eat a starch-based diet, as the humankind has for millions of years. Thank you very much.
philosophy that you teach in terms of diet is diametrically opposed to what I teach.
Yeah, I know that.
Oh, you know that. You're familiar with my work.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't want to get into arguments today because I know you believe as strongly as I do in our particular approaches. What I want to know, what I'd like to try and find out during this particular hour is why the differences. Could you start out by telling people basically what you believe?
Yeah, sure. I believe that as a physician, I've been called upon to treat an awful lot of people with a lot of medical conditions, which have arisen because, in large part, the diet of the 20th century just doesn't work and is causing certain medical problems. And I also believe that that it's important for the physician to find out just what the specific problems are that a person has, and then to come up with a diet which is corrective of that disturbance. And I think starting from scratch, perhaps the theories that you're espousing might work very well, but unfortunately we're not starting from scratch. We now have a population which is victimized by an epidemic of an insulin disorder that's based on the fact that we've been fed too much refined carbohydrates, too much sugar, and we just simply haven't been able to keep that mechanism under control. So we have about 50 million or more Americans with documented or documentable insulin resistance and hyperinsulinism, which leads them to, number one, obesity, which is the number one consequence, but there are consequences even more serious than that, namely high blood pressure and all the blood sugar disturbances, including diabetes, and its number one sequel, which is coronary heart disease. So we see heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, obesity, and a variety of other conditions caused perhaps in greatest part by a disturbance in insulin metabolism.
Okay, let me just bring it to the point here because I've got to take a break. Basically, you think it's the carbohydrates, and the way we ought to approach the problem is to eat a high-protein diet consisting of poultry, various kinds of meats, and to avoid starches and simple sugars. Is that right?
Well, not quite.
Well, we'll get to it in detail in just a moment. Unfortunately, we have to take a commercial break. This is Dr. John McDougall on the Northern California Radio Network, and my guest is Dr. Robert Atkins. He wrote The Diet Revolution, and now Dr. Atkins' new Diet Revolution, which is, I'm sure, a bestseller in the various bookstores. If I could just try and summarize, and I don't do this to take away from your message, I just want to make sure that I bring the understanding to my listeners and also to me and make sure I have it correct. Essentially, what we've talked about so far is that elevated insulin levels, which you believe are caused by high carbohydrates, particularly the refined carbohydrates in our diet, result in various diseases like high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and so on. And the solution to the problem is to get away from the carbohydrates and hit the high-protein foods hard, such as beef, poultry, fish products, eggs, cheese, and so on. Is that correct?
Well, the solution is to bypass the problem. If you have a carbohydrate disorder and then you don't eat carbohydrates, then you become a normal person with regard to your entire metabolic profile, because you've bypassed the only problem that you have.
And the problem in your mind is carbohydrates.
Well, the problem in our experience, and remember my experience involves 40,000 patients that we've treated at the Atkins Center since the 60s.
Yes.
And my experience has been, and I work with a lot of different diets, but the one that has consistently worked the best for this group of people, and I certainly am not into a one-diet-fits-all philosophy at all. I think you have to match the diet to the clinical problem. But the clinical problem of overweight people is, and that's documented over and over again, certainly our lab work clearly shows it, the problem is hyperinsulinism. This is what you find. You don't find slight elevations of the insulin level. You find 5, 10, 20 times the normal amount of insulin response in overweight people as you do in normal people. And we simply bypass their problem by taking away their carbohydrates. Yes, that leaves them free to eat the meat, the fish, the fowl, the eggs, and the cheese, the foods which don't have carbohydrates.
Right. And part of the key, as I understand from following your philosophy over years, is that what you end up doing is putting them into ketosis, and as a consequence, they lose weight. And is it the weight loss that corrects that insulinism?
The word consequence is a little inappropriate. Ketosis is simply a measure of the burning of your stored fat. When you burn your stored fat, it breaks down into free fatty acids and ketone bodies. That's the way it breaks down. That's the way it serves as fuel. So when we put people into ketosis, we're simply saying, okay, now you're going to use your stored fat as the fuel. You've been storing it all these years. Finally, you get a chance to burn it up, use it for fuel, which is the only way you can burn it up, and become slim. And the consequence is that the weight loss, the project of losing weight is extremely easy when a person can eat all the fish and chicken and steak that he wants 3, 4, 5 times a day if necessary without worrying about quantity, and still undergo a weight loss of about a pound a day and consistently and lose weight as long as he stays on such a diet. And for the person who likes to eat animal food, it's an absolute breeze. For the person that is a vegetarian and doesn't like it, it's not a very pleasant diet.
Well, Dr. Atkins, tell me, is it the weight loss then that corrects the hyperinsulinism?
No, I would say not. The hyperinsulinism is corrected by not stimulating insulin release by giving carbohydrates. So we'll take a person who has one of these problems, let's say hypertension. 60% of hypertension has now been adjudged, certainly by Gerald Reaven at Stanford and that group, to be due to hyperinsulinism. So as soon as we take the carbohydrates away, 3 days later, we've got a blood pressure drop of 15, 20 points. And certainly they haven't lost a lot of weight in 3 days.
So you think that the carbohydrates themselves stimulate elevated blood pressure?
Well, I mean, everybody's eating carbohydrates. I'm saying the absence of carbohydrates corrects the insulin disorder and allows the blood pressure to become normal.
Is it possible that the ketoacidosis dilates the blood vessels and causes the drop in blood pressure?
Well, I haven't considered that possibility, and I don't think that that's what happens.
Okay. There are a couple of things, from my background, from my education, that I have to introduce here. Okay. One is that work by Bierman and Brunzell, University of Washington.
Ed Bierman, we were classmates.
Oh, good. Well, he did work on adult-type diabetics, and what he did is he replaced, he increased the white sugar content of the diet. Are you familiar with the study published in the New England Journal in 1978? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And when they doubled the white sugar content of the diet, every aspect of diabetes became better, including 24-hour sugars.
You know what the problem is? You're not atypical of a lot of physicians who look at that work and come to that conclusion, but we're talking about a J-shaped or a U-shaped curve. And what he's working with is just one limb of that curve, which is on a group of diets, all of which are high in carbohydrate, none of which are low in carbohydrate, and yet along that limb of the curve, you get that relationship. But you get into the ultra-low carbohydrate intake, you find exactly the opposite relationship.
Okay, but his conclusion in the article was that even pure white sugar, the most disgusting carbohydrate, stimulates insulin sensitivity, makes insulin work better. Was that not correct?
Well, if that was his conclusion under those circumstances, okay, that's true, but that is not the same as talking about what happens when you restrict carbohydrates. Right, we're talking about a completely different.
Okay, I'm not trying to say you don't get results, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to see why other people get completely different results than you do, and how maybe we can see some common truth in this whole thing.
All right, they get different results from me because they don't do the same thing.
All right, well, let me ask you about some other work that you're familiar with, and that's Dr. James Anderson at the University of Kentucky in Lexington at his medical school. What he does is he increases the carbohydrate in the form of complex carbohydrates and even fruits to around 65-75% of the intake, and drastically reduces the protein intake, and he gets somewhere between half and 2/3 of adult diabetics off all insulin, and he gets essentially all diabetics off of all of their diabetic pills. Now, that's completely opposite.
We accomplish exactly that.
Why?
Probably quicker. And, I just had a patient just this morning in my office who'd been on 40 units of insulin and for about 4 years.
But how can two separate diets, how can two diametrically opposed approaches get the same results is what I want to know. Now, you're a man of great experience.
All right, you want to go to Southeast Asia? Do you want to go by way of, you want to fly west or do you want to fly east? You'll get there either way.
Okay, well, that doesn't explain it to me, but
yes, it does. I mean, because why couldn't two diametrically opposed systems work?
Well, obviously they do. I'm taking for granted, I'm starting the show with the idea that what you do does work, and you do get these results. I don't doubt that at all.
Oh, you can't. You better.
What I'm trying to understand is why two completely separate approaches can get similar results, and I'm sure a lot of my listeners want to know the same thing.
Well,
so,
I think we have to start off with the weakness of the balance.
Let's do that in just a moment, because I'm going to have to take another commercial break. This is Dr. John McDougall with Dr. Robert Atkins, and I'll be back with you in just a couple of moments. The guest is Dr. Robert Atkins. Dr. Atkins, before we try and sort this thing out a little better as to why two diametrically opposed approaches can get the same results, I want to ask you about some other research that both of us are familiar with, and that's research that was started in the 1920s by Dr. Hinsworth and carried on by Dr. Shirley Sweeney.
That one I don't know.
Oh, you're not familiar with Hinsworth is the father of this whole thing. He's the father of the insulin response and diabetes and the effect of foods. And
Hinsworth.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And Dr. Shirley Sweeney. And remember Dr. Shirley Sweeney took his medical students, his 20-year-old medical students, and he fed them 3 different kinds of diets, one high in carbohydrate, in fact, half with sugar, half with starch, and one high in fat and one high in protein. And the one high in protein, he took all those healthy 20-year-old medical students, the one high in fat, those healthy 20-year-old medical students, he fed them a very high-fat diet. It was very greasy. And he created a diabetes according to the glucose tolerance test in every one of his medical students. Then he turned around and the next week fed them a diet for 2 days.
Well, now, wait, this wasn't this really short-term thing where he took advantage of the, did a glucose tolerance test immediately after being on that diet.
Well, of course.
Because that's considered to be a fallacious science now, because you have to at least give the body a chance to equilibrate before you do a glucose tolerance.
Well, the way I look at it, the reason I was taught that you had to put somebody on carbohydrates for 2 days before you do the glucose tolerance test is because you'd end up with almost all Americans showing some element of glucose intolerance because they eat such a greasy diet.
Yeah, but it would be an artifact, yeah.
Well, so the point is that what Shirley Sweeney found in the 1920s is that fat paralyzes insulin and carbohydrate actually makes insulin work better. And people over and over and over again, Dr. Sine in 1955 in his Lancet article showed the same thing. Over and over again, they show carbohydrates make insulin work better, and yet what you find is just the opposite. You find carbohydrates make insulin work worse. No,
I'm not saying that. I'm talking about, number one, we're talking about hyperinsulinism.
Yes, well,
we're talking about not making the insulin work better, but bypassing an abnormality.
But if it doesn't work well, then the body produces more, and you get hyperinsulinism. And Farquhar and many other people have shown that when you feed high-fat diets, you get elevated insulin levels.
Yeah, but you're still looking at, you continue to look at what happens if you add fat to a diet with carbohydrates. Okay. You keep making that same misplaced conclusion.
All right.
You have to look at 0 carbohydrate as or 20 grams or some very low carbohydrate to ask what happens when we have changed the primary fuel of the body from carbohydrate and glycogen to stored fat. Okay. What happens when a person is burning stored fat? Actually, it's much more similar to the condition of fasting, but in a sense it's a modified fast. But the similarity between carbohydrate restriction and fasting is what has been noticed throughout the literature. Now, you're talking about studies which are really not basically dealing with what we're observing or what we're creating. We're creating a situation where the person burns his fat because it is the next fuel in the pecking order of fuels to be burned after the carbohydrates have been very systematically slashed.
Would you say that the mechanism involved in your approach is similar to people who use little cans of protein powder, like the Cambridge diet, like the OptiFast program? Are we talking about a similar mechanism?
It started off that way, but it isn't.
Why?
Because what they're doing is they're just taking a fast and modifying it by some protein, but now they've made now they're modifying it by about 30 grams of carbohydrate as well.
So they're making a mistake by adding the carbohydrate.
Well, they're taking away the number one advantage of a low-carbohydrate diet, which is you can eat as much as you want. I mean, if you're going to be on a diet, you might as well eat, because eating is the one thing that people really miss if they're on the other kind of a diet.
Well, see, that's one of the things that people who advocate, like myself, high-carbohydrate diets say also is you can eat as much as you want, and we use the fact that there are 1 billion Chinese and they're all thin.